Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got a really interesting combo to try out with a new choke that I have never tested before and I really haven't seen and heard a lot about it. That's another one of those older school factory Remington offerings, and it's kind of a little bit of an in-between choke. It's kind of meant for a couple different factors, so I'm really curious to see what it can do for a starting point with these particular shells we've got today as well. But first up, for the shells that we're running today, I brought out some more of the Winchester Super X turkey loads. These ones are a 12 gauge, 2 3/4 inch, 1.5 ounce payload of lead 4s at about 1260 feet per second. We've tested these a few times with some surprisingly solid results, but I'm really curious to see how a 1.5 ounce lead 4 does through this new choke. These are a 2 3/4 inch shell with a little lighter payload, but a little larger pellet, so it could work out surprisingly well, or it could just not quite be enough to really dial these shells in. But as for our setup, I brought out my Remington 870 special purpose. It's got a 26-inch barrel on it, and this is our new choke. Doesn't look like anything fancy because, well, it's really not. This is a Remington Wingmaster HD Turkey Predator choke, kind of a mouthful of a name, and it's a 670 constriction choke. So definitely down there towards the turkey realm for sure, but it's not the usual 665, 660, something like that a lot of turkey chokes are nowadays, but we'll see what it does. I was already aware of the Remington Wingmaster HD shells. They have a variety of them, but I didn't realize they really made a choke for those shells, so now we may have to pick some up to try them. But is this choke gonna be enough constriction to get these Super X4s to perform? Maybe, maybe not. Kind of floats the line. They're calling it a turkey and predator choke, so we'll see what it does with the turkey scene today. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. We've got the target down there at 40 yards and the chrono to get our velocity, so let's get you guys a view of that target. We'll take our shot and we'll see what we can get for a starting point out of one of the little bit more old school Remington factory offerings here with this Wingmaster HD Turkey Predator 670. Is it going to work? Is it not? I really don't know what we're going to get yet, but let's take our shot and see what actually happens. All right, that show gave us 1377 through the chrono. Boss claim is only 1260, but it hasn't been terribly unusual that these shells are in the mid 1300s from our testing. So they are getting up and moving on out pretty quickly here. For a lead 4, that's plenty enough for a 40-yard turkey hunt. But did we actually get a good enough pattern down there or not? Let's go check it out and see what that old Remington Wingmaster choke actually did. All right, so here we have our 40-yard paper, and we definitely see some pretty interesting results here. Yes, we do indeed have a dead bird at 40 yards. There's one through the front edge of the brain, and several more sprinkled down there throughout the spine. And to be fair, there's nowhere left or right he can move to and get through that pattern. Do have a couple nice little hot clumps here and there right on the front edge of that bird's neck, but looking at the pattern as a whole, it's okay for what it is. It's definitely not anything overly impressive or special enough to write home about, but this is a 2 3/4 inch shell with only 1.5 ounces of 4s. We just don't have a ton of pellet count to work with, but it really isn't a terrible pattern overall. It might be a little bit more splotchy than what I would like to see it as. We definitely have a little bit thinner area down here, kind of above that bird's beard area. It might be a little bit thin right above the top of that bird's head, and we might have a few little straggly flyers and stringy bits around the edges. There's a few down there at the bottom as well, continuing up the right edge. So it's not overly even necessarily, but it is 40-yard capable. I don't think I would push it any farther than that, at least not from this combo. And overall, most likely that 670 constriction isn't quite enough for what these shells want to bring them in that little bit more and actually get those outer pellets in there with our core area how we'd like them to be. Sometimes 4s can prefer a little more breathing room, but these are a smaller payload, shorter length shell loaded with that larger shot size. Sometimes shells like that can prefer a little more choke to actually constrict the entire pattern down. We've definitely seen tighter from these shells for sure, but this is usable. And if that choke is 20 years old, potentially back there in the early 2000s, that could have been a pretty solid turkey pattern overall. It's clearly capable of doing the job even today, but I'm saying 40 yards is probably about the limit. So let me pull that turkey target down. I'll finish putting some big circles around everything, and we'll really get a good idea on how this pattern actually laid out on our target. All right, so now we've taken our turkey target down. I've recircled everything. We now have a 10-inch and a 20-inch circle, and it honestly looks a little bit nicer, all things considered, now that we got that turkey target out of the way. Within our 10-inch circle, we have 58 pellets, and it's decently even. You might have a little void up towards the top, kind of right under where I wrote 58, maybe one right center bottom edge of the 10-inch ring as well. But for the most part, we definitely have a little kind of golf ball sized little hot spot right in the middle there going on as well. Obviously, that's good enough for a 40-yard turkey hunt. Moving out to the 20-inch ring, which is a good representation on your leeway actually out there in the field, because you may not always have a perfectly dead centered up hit. We have an additional 84 pellets within our 20-inch ring, and it's, again, relatively even. You might have a little thin spot down at the bottom, maybe along the edge, kind of up along the top left there, but it's not anything overly drastic necessarily. We do have a number of pellets right around the outer edges of that circle as well, but only a few of them kind of right over there along the right, and maybe a couple of these bottom ones are actually kind of legitimate flyers. The rest of them are all pretty close right there to that 20-inch ring. So overall, not really too bad for what it is. That is a turkey killing pattern out to 40 yards. Me personally, I probably still wouldn't push it past 40, but if this is the combo you had or what you wanted to run, I mean, anything inside of 40 and that bird's going to be absolutely hammered. So you don't have to go spend big money or get a big, heavy, nasty recoiling shell nearly as bad as what a 3.5-inch load or a big heavy load of TSS would be to get perfectly solid enough turkey patterns. Now, obviously, the 3-inch version of this shell is going to give you some more payload there to work with, but for what it is, not too bad. Now that we can see our whole pattern, I think that the 670 Wingmaster choke actually did control our pattern decently well. So overall, I think it's a good starting point for that choke. That's the first time we've tested it with a shell that isn't anything too over the top special on its own either, and that's a perfectly solid enough result. So now we got to run some other shells through it and see what it can really do, because I bet we can dial it in and get some even more impressive results than that. But for what it is, that would absolutely get the job done for you. And here's the wad from that shell. Very typical Winchester equipment here. This is the same wad they use in the Super X, Double X, and Longbeard loads. Some of the new ones seem to be a little darker gray color, but they look the same, they feel the same, and they overall perform the same. So nothing out of the ordinary that I'm too worried about with this one. All right, y'all. Well, what did you think about that performance right there? Overall, it really isn't too bad of a pattern. I would absolutely hunt that if that's what I had. There's not going to be a turkey that makes it through that kind of swarm at 40 yards. Again, probably wouldn't want to push it much farther than that. But for the average turkey hunter, 90+% of their birds are shot at 25 to 30 yards, and you can't go wrong with that. That right there is a cheaper, more budget-oriented combo. It's not quite as bad in the recoil department as a big, heavier 3-inch type shell would be. And if you're shooting birds at 25 or 30 yards, it may give you a little more leeway to work with as well, while still hitting them with a pretty good amount of energy, considering the velocity we're getting out of a lead 4. So not a ton to really complain about there. It might not be absolutely perfect throughout the entire thing. There may be a few smaller little voids in there, but it's not anything too detrimental to what the pattern actually is within 40 yards. So for a starting point, I think that old Remington Wingmaster Turkey Predator choke actually did a halfway decent job here. So now we got to test it some more with some other loads, maybe some higher end stuff, Longbeard, maybe TSS as well, because I think we can even get better than that out of it. That shell is pretty limited just within itself, so we're already seeing some pretty solid results. I have no doubt we can get even better out of it as well. But leave all your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these 2 3/4 inch Super X loads? Or do you have one of those old Remington Wingmaster HD chokes? And if so, what kind of results do you see from it, and what do you use it for? It's labeled as a Turkey Predator choke. I know they make Wingmaster waterfowl stuff as well, so kind of maybe Remington's version of a do-all choke, potentially? I don't know. Leave all your thoughts down below, as well as maybe what other combos do you want to see us run through that choke. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, you have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox, where you can send stuff if you'd like. All the information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.